I get to do something I love, combine two topics, two worlds that collided for Donald Trump. One is his pick to head the Office of Special Counsel. It's not what you think, but it is what you think. Has taken on some turbulence. They're going to have to probably pull that confirmation hearing. He's a 30-year-old right-wing podcaster with no real legal experience that's going to run the office. That's the watchdog and the sentinel for the administration, supposed to be independent and handle whistleblower and Hatch Act violation allegations. Hatch Act is when people who are in the federal government or state workers who work on federal programs do things to influence politics or elections. That's a Hatch Act violation. It's not a crime. It's just a Hatch Act violation. But we now have new reporting that Donald Trump has decided that he's going to try to go after Jack Smith, his special prosecutor, special counsel, for violation of the Hatch Act under some Looney Tunes argument that by prosecuting Donald Trump for crimes, obtaining an indictment from not one but two different grand juries, that somehow was a federal officer using his position to interfere with elections. No, it wasn't. It was bringing somebody to justice who committed crimes. That's what happened. So I'm going to wrap up this Hatch Act BS investigation, which is supposed to be investigated by the Office of Special Counsel, and also touch on why Donald Trump's pick to run the Office of Special Counsel, a partisan right-wing hack who supports white supremacist, anti-9/11, 9/11 denier, hoaxer, is not going to end up being the head of the Office of Special Counsel. I'll tie it together right here on Legal AF on Sunday afternoon. I'm Michael Popok. Take a minute and hit the free subscribe button. If just 10% of my audience would hit the subscribe button, which is free, we'd have our audience match our subscriber base, and we'd be rolling in heaven. We'd roll it in the hay. Let's get down to it with the special counsel's two ways. All right. I woke up to the reporting that Donald Trump is rigging an attack on the special counsel. Let me give you the highlights first. Hatch Act is not a crime. It is a workplace guideline. The most that the Office of Special Counsel, I know it's confusing, that is responsible for policing these issues can do is recommend fines or removal from office. Okay, just to put it in perspective, 13 members of the Trump administration during the first term were found by the Office of Special Counsel to have violated the Hatch Act. 13, including Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, Kellyanne Conway, and Stephen Miller, and Mike Pompeo, then the Secretary of State. All of them were found to be campaigning while they were being paid by the taxpayers to do their public job. Okay, so now none of them got fined or sanctioned or removed from office or fired. It's all aspirational at best. But it's a talking point for Donald Trump as he's trying to distract from the failing economy and shoving the American economy and the American consumer and voter through the wood chipper. While he has his Epstein scandal, that the more he tries to get away from it, the more he sucks himself into it. So he needs distractors. Let's go after Barack Obama for being a seditious conspirator. Okay, let's go after, what about the Clintons? What about the Bidens? What about Jack Smith? Remember, we're just going down Donald Trump's checklist, checking the boxes of all the people that he wants to retaliate against. So, Hatch Act. It's a provision that says if you're a federal worker or you are a state employee that gets federal funding, you can't campaign on the job. You can't try to interfere with or influence a federal election on the job. So what's the argument? All right, here's how it worked. Donald Trump said, we ought to get Jack Smith. We got to muss him up. We got to bloody his nose. What can we do? So they reached out to Senator Tom Cotton, who posted on social media that we're now 6 months into the administration, several years after the prosecution and investigation of Donald Trump by Jack Smith, the special counsel. And now suddenly, Tom Cotton just suddenly wakes up like Rip Van Winkle. Ooh, I just woke up. What was happening? And says, I think that's a Hatch Act violation. Right on cue, 3 days later, the Office of Special Counsel, now headed by an interim head, because Paul Ingrassia, I'm going to do a whole back end of this hot take on, will never be confirmed. So it's being run now by Jamie Greer, who used to be Donald Trump's trade representative. Again, this is supposed to be an independent, bipartisan entity created by Congress, independent from the executive branch. And all Donald Trump is doing is putting political hacks and bootlickers into that office. What an embarrassment. What a disgrace. So the investigation is of this Office of Special Counsel. There's basically three parts of a protective mechanism within the federal government, and Donald Trump has destroyed all three of them. There was the National Labor Relations Board. Okay, that's now gone. Donald Trump hasn't appointed anybody to it. He fired the head of it. And anybody that thinks labor unions have a place now for protection in a government regulatory entity, it is over. There was also the Merit System Protection Board. That also was for federal workers, and that got eliminated. The third was the Office of Special Counsel. If you remember, Donald Trump fired the head of the Office of Special Counsel, Hampton Dellinger, who, full disclosure, his late father was my constitutional law professor, and I played basketball with Hampton Dellinger when I was in law school. That's why. All around great guy. That's Hampton Dellinger, Office of Special Counsel, fired by Donald Trump. Kathy Harris, head of the Merit Systems Protection Board, fired by Donald Trump. Gwen Wilcox, head of the National Labor Relations Board, fired by Donald Trump. Two of those, Harris and Wilcox, took their cases up to the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, nah, we're okay. You can fire these people, even though Congress said you can only fire them with cause. We think that's an executive branch violation. You can fire them. Hampton Dellinger was smarter. He said, I'm not even appealing. I see the writing on the wall. I'm out. So he left office early. And that's why that office has been filled by an acting interim, Jamie Greer. All right. So that's the Office of Special Counsel. They're not prosecutors. They're responsible for Hatch Act violations and federal whistleblower. If you're a federal whistleblower, would you go to any of these people being appointed by Donald Trump? No, you would not. Okay. So now let's move forward. You've got the phony Tom Cotton. I think we should investigate. I don't know why I'm doing Foghorn Leghorn from the Warner Brothers. I think we should investigate Jack Smith for violating the Hatch Act. Okay. And then, of course, they violate. All right. Now let's go to Paul Ingrassia. Paul Ingrassia, I did a whole hot take on about 3 months ago. This guy's 30 years old. He served half a year in the government. He's been a lawyer for about a year. And he's a right-wing MAGA podcaster. So right-wing MAGA podcaster that he actually aligns himself with Nick Fuentes, friend of Donald Trump, who's not only a white supremacist, believes in white power, white nationalist, Holocaust denier, 9/11 denier, and this guy, Paul Ingrassia, believes all those things and agrees with all those things. You're right, Nick. You're right, Nick, about 9/11. It was an inside job. You're right, Nick, about the Holocaust. All those Jews weren't and others weren't cremated. That would be terrible. You're right about white men not getting their fair shake in society. That's Paul Ingrassia. And if you don't believe me, let me show you a clip, and then I'll tell you why they pulled his Senate confirmation submission. Here's a clip so you get a little taste of Paul Ingrassia with another right-wing MAGA young Republican. Roll the clip.
It's being covered as a competitive tight race because obviously that's the agenda of the fake news media, of the legacy media institutions. They have to frame it. They have to make it's tough to make Joe Biden look good now. On the international stage, anyone with two eyes could see that this guy is a complete embarrassment. He's losing control of his mental marbles.
Now, Tom Tillis, who's on his way out of the Senate, but is blocking Ingrassia, and as a result, they pulled his ticket. They pulled his Senate confirmation because he can't get confirmed. I mean, even the MAGA Senate, controlled by Trump and Senator, the Senate Majority Leader Thune, even they can't get behind that guy. So here's my favorite quote. Here's what Tom Tillis said. About Paul Ingrassia. He checks all the boxes. They're just all the wrong boxes. That is one of the greatest lines. I'm going to use that one. He checks all the boxes. They're just all the wrong boxes. So he won't get confirmed. But you see, well, the reason I'm making this point is that Donald Trump has tried to convert and morph the independent, what used to be an independent special counsel's office, into his partisan political hack machine, part of the Trump hack ecosystem. So now you can understand why, whether it's Jamie Greer or Paul Ingrassia or the next loser that heads the office. If I'm Jack Smith, I'm like, that's what they got on me? A Hatch Act guidelines violation? Bring it. Now remember, Jack Smith, other than the filings he made, the indictment he obtained, the filings he made in courts, whether it was at the Supreme Court, Judge Chutkan's court for the DC election interference case, or Judge Cannon's court for the Mar-a-Lago espionage case, he never spoke publicly. He rarely went to the podium. And if he went to the podium, he only recited what was exactly in his filings. You know, he had almost zero press conferences. When he did, it was only about what they filed. He rarely took questions, if ever. We used to joke about him on Legal AF and Midas Touch. We used to call him Subway Jack, because he would just be seen with a thermos in one hand and a Subway sandwich in the other, under his arm, going to work, chopping wood, stacking it up and chopping wood. Just methodical. He is the opposite of a partisan political hack. I think he's registered independent. He hasn't voted in years. They plucked him from I think he was in the Netherlands, where he was a prosecutor for the International Criminal Court. And he wasn't even in America for anything that Donald Trump did. He was unassailable when he was picked by Merrick Garland. Why don't you just say that Merrick Garland, the attorney general, was interfering with the election? That'll be next. Was interfering with the election because he was doing his job, investigating and prosecuting Donald Trump for the crimes that he allegedly committed. Think about all the prosecutors that investigated, got grand jury indictments, and convicted Donald Trump, or convicted Donald Trump. You've got Alvin Bragg, Manhattan DA, gets a 34-count felony indictment, gets a 34-count felony conviction. He convinces 20 grand jurors. He convinces 12 jurors about the crimes. Phony Willis gets a special grand jury to recommend an indictment, a regular grand jury to indict Donald Trump. And only if he hadn't become president, she would have gotten that conviction likely. Jack Smith has a grand jury indict Donald Trump, convinces a grand jury to indict Donald Trump about Mar-a-Lago obstruction and espionage. Gets another grand jury to indict about DC election interference. He would have gotten his convictions if it wasn't, at least in DC, if it wasn't for Donald Trump becoming president again. And there's other states as well. Arizona got indictments against people around Donald Trump and the rest. So all the prosecutors, all the grand jurors, all the regular jurors, it's all a conspiracy. No, it's based on evidence. And that's Donald Trump's problem. It's based on evidence. But I also wanted to let people know that this Hatch Act thing is so BS. I don't even think Jack Smith's not, his heart didn't skip a beat when this happened. This is all they got on him for now, especially given that 13 members of Donald Trump's own administration, including his son-in-law and Kellyanne Conway and Stephen Miller, were found to have violated the Hatch Act. Nothing happened to them either. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states. States and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.